Full disclosure, I'm wearing a Colts jersey today for two reasons. Number one, my mods are sick individuals and bought it for me specifically to wear for this show, and so I'm honoring their request. I don't feel good about that. But number two, it's an Andre Johnson jersey, so in my head canon, I'm just going to pretend like I'm wearing a Texans jersey, just a slightly soiled one, depraved one.
Take the edge off a little bit.
But yeah, I'm not happy about it, but
it's a great way to start an episode. Just not happy about it.
I'm just not happy about being in the AFC South at all right now because we have four very young, very talented quarterbacks. And I, as a Texans fan, have been waiting for a very long time to have a quarterback like C.J. Stroud who's as good on the field as he is off the field. That's a nice change of pace. Potentially a top 5 quarterback in the NFL out the box. And then the fucking Colts get Anthony Richardson. It's like, guys, you had Peyton for like 15 years. Then you got Andrew Luck. You did like 5 years in the gulag where you're doing, the Phillip Rivers, Jacoby Brissett, Carson Wentz thing. Like, okay, you were bad for half a decade. Cry me a river. You can't just get Anthony Richardson and be like, oh, we're good again. Like, fuck you. Like, this is not cool. I'm tired of being in this division. And I know as a Bears fan, you're like, oh, you think you have it bad? I do have it bad.
At least you got the 5 years.
Like we did a lot with it. We had one window.
Now that's a you problem. Anyway. We had zero window and zero quarterback until maybe this year, so we'll see.
It felt so good to have C.J. Stroud and then just knowing that Anthony Richardson was also going to be good. And just knowing that Trevor Lawrence is going to bounce back. And just knowing that somehow against all odds, Will Levis is going to work out.
Yep.
Like, I just can't have a solid 10-year run where we're winning the division every single year.
Oh, that's all you want is a solid 10-year run?
For the first time in my life, it would be great. But no, fucking Colts have to have a loaded roster.
Yep.
And a really good young quarterback who, we believe in heavily. We've always believed in Anthony Richardson. Which, by the way, did I tell you the story about,
I don't think so.
About AR?
Which one?
Well, there's a lot of stories about AR. He's like a Paul Bunyan figure in Indy at this point. But I was talking to his trainers, and they were rehabbing him, during his recovery for surgery last year. And C.J. Stroud won Rookie of the Year because, of course, he did. He's amazing. Love that man. Ant's first words after CJ won Rookie of the Year were, damn, guess I got to win MVP next year. And I'm like, here we go. Again with this shit.
It's going to be fun football for a long time in that division. And,
people
it is.
That aren't in the division, yeah.
It's good for football. It is tough for fans in the division because we've said it about other divisions for a long time. We've said it about their AFC North rivals for a long time. They just beat the living hell out of each other every week. AFC South is approaching that status, and it makes for great football. Makes for tough fandom, maybe.
I just wish Ant was like hateable as a human, but he's not. He's like Andrew Luck, and I think that's what pisses me off. Is like, I loved Andrew Luck. I hated playing against Andrew Luck, but I loved Andrew Luck. He's a great person, and Anthony Richardson is a great person, and Peyton was a great person. It's like, can't you just be evil? Like, that would just make it so much easier on me. But no,
it would justify my feelings of dislike.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough one. Well, if you're a Colts fan, you're probably going to enjoy it because we're going to be high on the Colts again. If you're a Texans fan, skip it. Wait till the end of the week. We'll have our group therapy session on Thursday where we talk about how good we are. But today it's Colts Day, so we'll talk about scheme. We'll talk about data. We'll talk about their rookie class because, of course, they had a good draft. And we'll talk about what they did in free agency, retaining their core at a discount because, of course, they did. It's a lot to go over today. So with that being said, Jay, please mercifully roll this intro. Welcome back once again to the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm Brett. That's EJ. Talking Colts today. Huge Colts discussion, which, like a lot of other AFC South teams, or really like all the other AFC South teams, national media doesn't tend to cover this division that much, and this is probably the best the division's been in a long, long time, like as a whole. If the bottom team is mid, can't remember the last time I could say that about the AFC South, where like the worst team is okay. And then you got 3 teams that are legitimate playoff contenders, if not more than just playoff contenders. You got young, exciting quarterbacks. You got good coaches. Like, this is a really good division that a lot of people don't talk about. So we're dedicating this week to talking about every single team in the AFC South in depth. Before we get going, EJ, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Got a fresh new shiny homage shirt that shows Lucas Oil Stadium because my first visit to that stadium this year was for the Combine, not for a game, but really cool stadium. And this is a really cool team. You talk about national media maybe not talking about this division as much. I think that's going to change. I think it's going to have to. I think AR, Stroud obviously did it last year. D'Amico and Stroud and the Texans really changed the tenor of that conversation. I think, Steichen and AR are going to, hopefully have a healthy run together and, again, change that conversation. And national media is not going to be able to avoid, division leaders, conference leaders. They're going to have to talk about this division. Jags have been kind of holding that banner, holding hope since Trevor was drafted, but the rest of the division up and down. And so it was easy to avoid. I think it's going to be impossible to avoid.
Side note, by the way, my first trip to Lucas Oil was also this year for the Combine. And, we got to go everywhere in Lucas Oil. We were down in the depths. We were on the field during the drills and everything like that. So we scoured every single inch of that stadium, and that is a cool stadium. Like, even though it's one of the older ones in the NFL now, I think at this point it's probably in the top half of the league in terms of age. Mm-hmm. Aesthetically, it's easily top 5 still. Sightlines are incredible. Location is incredible. Like, it's like super walkable from all the hotels. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's literally like tunnels that lead from the convention center down into it. It's so funny how going into the Combine, I was like, oh yeah, they're probably going to move it at some point because the league seems to have a vested interest in kind of turning it into a media event, at SoFi, because NFL media is there and ESPN's there and everything like that. After going through it, I was like, I don't know, man. Like, that whole city seems kind of purpose-built for the NFL Combine. I don't know if I would move it. Like, Lucas Oil is a great location. I really do like that stadium a lot.
And a shout out to the town as well. We had a lot of fun in Indy. Like, people were extremely friendly. Like you said, very walkable town. A little bit cold during Combine. It wasn't as cold this year. I know it's been much colder in years past.
Speak for yourself, man. I had to walk down the street. So there's like I think it's like a FedEx facility that's like across the street from the stadium, and it's probably 3 or 4 stories high. And so there's just this like actual canyon that gets tunnel. Created. Yep. I'm not kidding you. It almost knocked me over like 3 times just walking it, like gusts of like 60 miles an hour.
Now,
man.
Here I am trying to pump up the Indy tourism board. And you're like, but it's a freezer.
Well, don't go in February.
Yeah, great town, excellent food. Obviously, social time after the Combine, very productive. But in terms of facilities, and I know it's important to the NFL as well that they have enough medical facilities because medical is a huge part of the Combine that people don't really talk about a lot, but teams care very deeply about it. So having easy access and enough medical facilities to handle the load during that week of all the testing they need to do is very important. The field's getting replaced. The stadium's awesome in terms of aura and the race cars and airplanes hanging up in the concourses. It's a great place to be. And it was a really enjoyable experience, event, town, everything kind of combined together, pun intended. And we'll be back next year.
Yeah, I can't wait to go back.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite NFL event I've ever been to. It was
a lot of fun.
Before we dive into the actual team itself that occupies that building, do want to shout out our main sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, for helping to make this entire series happen in the first place. They have funded basically every episode we've made for the last 2 years, and every episode that we're making going forward. Like, they wanted to hitch their wagon to this show because they believe in what we do here, as well as they believe in our community.
Yeah.
So, again, want to thank Underdog. If you're not familiar with Underdog, if you don't play on Underdog, you can check them out at the link in the description below. You can do anything from best ball drafts, fantasy football. Like, if you got the itch already and you want to start drafting, you can do that on Underdog Fantasy. There's like millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars in prizes available for best ball summer. If you're doing pick'ems, well, by the time this comes out, I don't think hockey NBA are still going to be going on, but there's still going to be baseball, there's golf. I mean, every sport you can think of, they got pick'ems going. So if you just like watching sports in general and want to make that a more enjoyable experience, if you sign up at the link in the description below or on the QR code on the screen, use promo code BOOTLEG. They will give you a special pick'em in the lobby, as well as up to $250 in bonus cash. So check out Underdog. If it's something you want to play, you can get a whole bunch of extra bonuses for free on us with promo code BOOTLEG. We definitely would not be doing what we're doing without them. So all of our friends over at Underdog watching this, thank you guys for that. And with all that being said, I want to transition to a very brief look back at 2023. And this is kind of a unique situation, I would say, when we're kind of looking at all the 2023 look backs for all these different teams we're going through this summer. They bottomed out last year because of injuries at right tackle, injuries at quarterback. You had a rookie coach, everything like that. They did have some personnel deficiencies here and there, but for the most part, those have been shored up. But they bottomed out last year, and we're still literally one play away from the playoffs and won 9 games. So when you go back and you look at our Colts preview last year, where we said, hey, this could be an 11-win team, which I think was actually my ceiling for them last year was 11 wins, making the playoffs, making noise, even with rookies all over the place. People said I was crazy. No, this team bottomed out. Worst case scenario happened. Your stud rookie quarterback, at least who we think is going to be a stud rookie quarterback, gets hurt in September 3 times. They eventually shut him down. You got a first-year head coach. You got Gardner Minshew starting pretty much the entire year, and you win 9 games. That's the worst they're going to be, guys. This is a good team.
We loved the roster. We had a lot of faith in AR, as you've said, but Shane Steichen as well, I think, was a revelation in his first season. Talk about a rookie head coach. He didn't hold them back. He propped them up. You won 9 games with Gardner Minshew.
That's insane.
You're better than 500 your first year in the team when the guy you're counting on to lead you from under center goes down after a month. You don't fold the tents. You don't win 6 games and say, hey, we'll be back next year with AR. You win 9 games. You almost make the playoffs. You threaten until, like you said, very last game of the season. So 2023 Colts, 9-8, 3rd in the division. Think about that. 9 wins. 3rd in the division. We have teams we're going to talk about later this week that had 9 wins and won their division.
Mm-hmm.
So razor thin margin. Home record 4-5. Road record super impressive. Again, going on the road 5-3. A lot of those games with Gardner Minshew, rookie head coach, as you mentioned. The last 5 games 2-3, up and down, but that's to be expected. Got a couple of measurements to give nuance to that, to context, because we talk about all these teams and context matters. Matters a lot with the Colts because, again, they didn't have AR for most of the season. We're going to talk about QBS, which is a new measurement. It's called quarterback support. Developed it 3 or 4 months ago with Arjun Menon from PFF. There's a link in the description that'll explain that. It's basically 5 measurements, 3 on offense, 1 on defense, 1 on special teams, to talk about how did you set the stage as a team for your quarterback to perform? How much support did you give them to accomplish things that they need to accomplish on the field? Now, it's a 0 to 100 measurement. 0 is the worst team in the league. 100 is the best. The Colts rated 41.9. That made them 19th out of 32 teams. Pretty damn close to the middle of the league. And again, with the context we've already talked about, that's important. So QBS is the how should you have done measurement, and then the measurement we introduced on this series last year, Power Score, is the how did you do measurement. And that's six stats: rushing offense, passing offense, rush defense, pass defense, points scored, and points allowed. We simply assign their league rank. Where did they finish in the NFL? Were they 11th? Were they 20th? Were they 31st? And then we average those out, and that gives you your score. Lower is better. You want to be first in everything. Nobody's first in everything. The Colts' power score was 18.2, also 19th overall. So they set the table to be 19th overall, and they were 19th overall. They didn't overperform or underperform. They performed sort of as expected. And again, as you said, that's as low as they're going to be. Playing a backup quarterback, offensive line issues at right tackle, getting the new system under a head coach. They're not going to be worse than that. And they didn't squander any opportunities. They set the table well, and they performed at that level. So if they set the table higher, as we talk about all these additions and the scheme and everything else, there is a solid expectation that they will perform at that level and move up those ranks.
what I found fascinating, when kind of looking at this chart that you put together for every team, I was like, okay, rushing offense, 16th. They were dealing with some injuries in the backfield to start the year. In the entire backfield, whether it was running back or quarterback.
Yep.
They had some offensive line injuries they were dealing with. Johnny Woods missed the entire season, so they didn't have like their best wide tight end, at least in my opinion, their best wide tight end on the field. And they still were dead average in rushing offense EPA.
Yep.
They were 18th in passing offense, which again, with Gardner Minshew at quarterback and a turnstile Blake Freeland at right tackle, who's coming in because of injuries and everything like that, gave up an 11% pressure rate at right tackle, which is insane. To be 18th, okay, we'll take that. Run defense, 20th, not great, but not horrible. Pass defense, 16th, again, dead ass in the middle.
Yep.
And so you look at the last three categories, and you're like, all right, so far this team is almost like uncannily mid in pretty much
right
every
down
category,
the middle.
right? But they're 11th in points scored because they were really good in the red zone.
Yep.
They were 28th in points allowed. Also, their point differential was 19th because why not?
19 is a Colts thing. I feel like we need a 19 Colts jersey.
But that 28th in points allowed number was kind of what set my radar off, because I was like, okay, well, how are they like mid at worst in a lot of defensive categories, or at least the ones that matter?
Mm-hmm.
And like even in red zone defense, they were 17th, so they're dead average in red zone. It was like, how did they allow the 28th, or I guess how were they the 28th worst team in terms of
Scoring defense.
points allowed? I think it was like 24 points a game or something like that. Like, what happened there? Because if you're not bad in the red zone, really the only other thing that could cause you to give up that many points is either A, you're horrible on special teams, B, you give up like a bunch of pick sixes, or C, which was the actual answer, explosive touchdowns.
Yeah.
They gave up the third most touchdowns in the NFL of 20-plus yards, and they had the most 20-plus yard touchdowns given up from missed tackles. If you look at this team, and I went back and I watched all of these touchdowns, every other week, like literally every other week, almost like clockwork, there was a long 25, 30, 40-yard touchdown where like somebody takes a bad angle, somebody misses a tackle, they break loose, they score, you're putting Gardner Minshew in like an extra 7 points in the hole. And then, of course, Gardner's going to press because he's Gardner Minshew. He's going to try to make plays he can't make. He's going to, turn the ball over, get him even, into deeper trouble. And like that was the formula for why this team lost the games they lost, which is we're gonna have the opposing offense pop one big play on us because somebody missed a tackle, and then we're gonna fight for our lives the rest of the day to try to climb out of that hole. And sometimes they did, most of the times they didn't. But like that's how they lost those games, was honestly the defense bending and bending and bending and not breaking, and then oh shit, they broke. But usually it was from not in the red zone. It was from like 40 yards outside the end zone. And if they just clean up that one thing, if they just tackle better, like literally that's it. If they just tackle better, never mind, the additions they've made in the draft. If they just fix that one thing, this is probably like at worst an average defense, but more likely significantly above average defense.
Yeah, it was pretty close to an average defense as is. Like a 20th rank in rushing defense isn't what it sounds like in terms of the importance to winning football games. You can survive with the 20th ranked run defense, especially in the modern NFL. If you have the 16th ranked pass defense, that also is good enough if you're damn near top 10 in points scored. Like, think about that. Rookie head coach with backup quarterback, they were 11th. They were almost top 10 in points scored, even despite all that. And the timing of those plays. Now, I don't have any data to back this up, unlike you. I almost want to make a new stat like deflation rating because
we're getting dangerously close to trying to assign a number value to momentum.
That's right. That is absolutely correct, because so many times with the Colts, it felt like right after they scored, like Minshew would come up with a touchdown, right? And maybe that was to pull them even, or maybe that was to go up by 3 or whatever else. And like 3 minutes later, here comes the 30-yard over-the-head touchdown, and it just pops the bubble. And then you're in chase mode, you're behind again, and then you're pressing and whatever. But it was like this was the roller coaster ride of the Colts season. Like, yeah, look at that. They're up by 3. Can you? Oh, really? Damn it. Like, that lasted all of 3 minutes. Like, how does that happen? And it felt like that happened to them over and over again. And it led to this, interesting scoring defense rank that was really low. And obviously, that's going to be an anchor around trying to win football games. And they still won 9 games being crappy at tackling, giving up explosive plays. Like, again, this is the worst they're going to be. They're not going to be significantly lower than this. And it's a plus 500. If they were in a different division, they would have been, winning that division. With this result, like, sleeping giant status applies here.
I want to focus on the scheme element here as well. Like, how did this offense perform as well as it did? I'm not going to say, again, they were elite, but they were 11th in points scored. That's significant. How did they do that? How did they make chicken salad out of chicken shit, so to speak, right? Because I honestly, one of the things I was really digging into the most when kind of preparing for this episode, we talked about the Eagles, I think it was last week. How did this offense perform so much better in a lot of key metrics than the Eagles did in a lot of key metrics, despite A, not having the same talent at a lot of positions, and B, again, working with a lot of backups, right? Like, how did they, with a similar overall philosophy, like they were third in shotgun in Indy at 82% of their snaps being in shotgun, like that's a lot. Eagles were first. They were the only other team besides Philly to run inside zone 40+% of the time. They were second in inside zone. Philly was first. They were second in RPO usage. Philly was first. Like, there's a lot of things that are similar.
It's almost like Shane Steichen came from Philly.
Go figure, right?
Weird.
But Steichen did it so much better. So I'm like, what was the difference here? Like, what made that work? And almost in a way, it's like, why was Steichen so much better for Philly than what they had last year? Because it's like, what's the secret sauce here? What's the difference? And I kind of went down a rabbit hole in terms of, I know, I went down a rabbit hole. This is
my shock face.
But it was all about formation distribution, because I was just looking at numbers, and that's the thing, is like when you're just trying to find the answer, sometimes you're just looking at numbers until something sticks pops out, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. Let me pull on that thread. And the number that popped up to me was formation distribution or receiver distribution, whatever you want to call it. 3x1 versus 2x2 versus 4x1 if you're going into a 4 strong look. Again, most plays are going to take place on a hash, so you're going to have the boundary side of the field or the short side of the field and the field side of the field. That's what coaches call it, or the wide side of the field. Again, very few plays are actually going to be in the middle of the field. So most NFL offenses, you're going to see a lot of 3x1 because of that. You put more receivers to the wider side of the field where there's more space to operate, right? There were only 3 teams in the entire NFL last year to have more than 50% of their snaps, and I'll say this part slowly, for the people that are audio only and are...
Oh, be honest, it's for me.
I'm trying to be nice here, EJ. I know I can say random numbers and watch your eyes roll in the back of your head.
Where did he come up with this?
So, in terms of having 50% or more of your snaps being in one distribution of receivers, whether it's 2x2 or 3x1 or 4x1, only 3 teams had a particular distribution that was 50% or more. All of them were 2x2, not 3x1. And they were the Eagles, the Colts, and the Panthers. So you had Shane Steichen, you had Shane Steichen's former team, and you had Frank Reich, who's like the grandfather of all these guys, right? Yeah. They all look up to Frank. They were all coached under Frank at one point, right? And I was like, okay, now we're talking. Like, that's the similarity that I think I can start with to then figure out the rest of this. Because that's the one thing beyond just RPOs and inside zone. Like, that's the one thing they share of, like, just how they line up.
Yeah.
And how they line up determines everything, right? And so I was like, okay, why are they doing this? What is the benefit of being in 2x2 that much? The Colts in particular did it 58% of the time. The NFL average is 42%. So what is their benefit of being in 2x2 with 2 receivers, a balanced formation, all the time. Well, knowing what I know about a bunch of different defenses, the most common check you're going to get against 2x2 on defense is cover 3. What works against cover 3? RPOs. Yeah. These are very RPO heavy teams. Again, the Eagles were 1, the Colts were 2. There it is. Okay. So they line up in 2x2 to get teams into cover 3 so they can RPO them to death. Now we're making progress. Okay, let me check on the coverage structures that the Colts face, that the Eagles face. Like, let me see if that actually worked. They were actually pretty low in cover 3 faced. Both of them were. The Eagles were 27th. The Colts were 22nd in terms of facing cover 3. Okay, well, what did teams actually play against them when they were in 2x2? The Colts saw a lot of man coverage, and the Eagles did not. They actually saw a lot of quarters. They didn't see a lot of man. Okay, why was that? Gardner Minshew can't run. If you're seeing man coverage, that means DBs are turning their backs and running with receivers. They don't have eyes on the quarterback. They're not going to, they call it zone eyes, right? So if the quarterback breaks the pocket and runs, like, you don't have a whole bunch of DBs looking at him, right? Yeah. Like, you don't play cover 1 against mobile quarterbacks for that reason, because you need all eyes on him to rally and tackle. Jalen Hurts didn't see a lot of man coverage when they were in 2x2, because teams were like, we're not going to play cover 1. We're not going to let that dude run on us. We're going to play quarters so that we can still, have good leverages against RPOs. We can still have zone eyes on the quarterback. We're going to play quarters all day, every day. They got the 5th most quarters in the entire league, like, regardless of formation. 5th most quarters in the entire league last year.
We're not doing it. We're 100%. Not giving you that.
Now, the Eagles' problem was they didn't have any adjustments to that whatsoever. No. And, we talked about that at length, but that was the difference. And so I look now at what the Colts offense, I think, was supposed to be last year. I think Shane Steichen, who uses more motion than Philly did, who works the middle of the field more than Philly did. Again, I made a comment last season that it felt like the Eagles were just running like a Chat GPT version of Shane Steichen's offense. Like, Shane Steichen just runs it better. He's more versatile. But I feel like the offense the Colts wanted to run last year was, we got Anthony Richardson out there, so they're not going to play man coverage against us, because that would be stupid. They're not going to play cover 3 against us, but if they do, we're going to RPO them to death, and they're going to show us quarters, because that's what Steichen saw in Philly, was quarters, quarters, quarters. What works against quarters? Holding that safety down. They call it a pin post. So you grab those safeties' eyes. There's nobody in the middle of the field. You throw the deep post behind it. That's where we're getting our chunks, right? And they have a bunch of vertical speed where they could have done that. AR goes down. Gardner goes in. He's not a rushing threat. Now we're seeing man coverage. It changes. Like, you can't really run RPOs against man coverage because they're just going to stick to the receivers. And then it's just a give read over and over and over again. It completely changed the offense to not have A, mobile element quarterback, and B, a guy who I think is going to be a pretty good deep ball thrower at quarterback, Anthony Richardson. And defenses could get away with just playing the same thing against them over and over and over again. And again, they still pulled out some pretty good offensive performances. They were still 11th in points scored.
Yeah.
But if AR was on the field and gave DCs less options against him in terms of how to attack his skill set, because he's 250 pounds and runs like a deer, I'll bet you anything they wouldn't have been 11th in points scored. They probably would have been like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So I think that's the offense they wanted to run last year. They couldn't do it. They're probably going to run it this year, and good luck. Like, I don't got any answers for that, because what are you supposed to do? He's not even 250 anymore. He's 255. What do you do against that? I got no idea.
I don't think a lot of people do. There's not very many people like him at that size, at that speed, and with that arm talent. And that summary is kind of the summary I think that we're going to give for the Colts 2023 season is, oh man, what could have been? Like, we saw little flashes of it. We got really excited about it. We said, this is working. Like, this is working early in the first month of a new coach, new quarterback combo. And they were still like, there were hold your breath plays like, oh my God, this is coming, right? So it's that sense of loss that we all felt when he got shut down for the season. It was the right decision, but we were sad about it in terms of, what could have been, right? And those stats are a very long way around the barn to say it could have been. It was probably going to be different because they have a very different capability set with AR on the field. And it goes back to all those times when people say, oh, well, coaches, they're not going to change the playbook when the signal caller changes. There are very few sort of carbon copies where you can port over even 85% of your playbook and just say, hey, do the same things that AR does. Like you said, there's not a lot of ARs running around. Like, you're not going to have
There's literally one in history.
You're not going to have a backup that has that capability, so you are going to have to make major shifts. That's what good coaches do. Talked about it yesterday with versatility in coaching, right? One of the primary characteristics you want in your coach is the flexibility and versatility to say, what is my actual talent pool? What is my actual skill set? What are we actually good at? And then maximizing that as opposed to saying, look, my playbook demands that you have capabilities that you don't have. Well, tough, right? You want a realistic coach. And Steichen showed himself to be a realistic coach and still came up as an almost top 10 scoring offense with those limitations after September. It's a really impressive coaching job, but there is that meat left on the bone. There is that what could have been if that didn't transpire that way.
On the defensive side of the ball, scheme-wise, cover 3.
I can't wait for this.
We say the same thing every year. It's Gus Bradley. They're running cover 3.
Yeah. You know what you're getting.
That's it.
Known.
It'll work. Mm-hmm. Cover 3 is still the most commonly played coverage in the NFL because it's the best coverage in the NFL. It's the one that has the least amount of ways to beat it, or at least not even say that. There are ways to beat cover 3. Cover 3 is the coverage that will make you work the hardest to score. How about that? Sure. And people say, it's cover 2. Well, Tampa 2, if we're being realistic, is just inverted cover 3. Even the coaches, and I've said this many times before, but if you've never seen this show, minor history lesson, Monty Kiffin, all the early 2000s Bucks coaches, all the mid 2000s Bears coaches, Eberflus, pretty much anybody that ever came from that Tampa 2 world, they just, it's inverted cover 3. It's just a different way of getting a middle defender and then 2 defenders outside of him. They're all playing deep thirds. It's just, instead of having the safety already be there, we just got freakish middle linebacker like Brian Urlacher who just turns and runs. It's the same zone distribution. So cover 3 or Tampa 2, whichever one, and some defenses that run a lot of cover 3 also run a lot of Tampa 2. Colts being
just flip it
one of them. That is the coverage that will limit explosive plays the most. It will make you work the hardest to score. It's going to frustrate teams the most because they don't give up as many explosive plays when they fucking tackle.
I was going to say, strange that we're saying that about a defense we just said gave up most explosive plays.
And that's why I made that stipulation, right? It's because
100%.
It's they don't play a system that gives up explosive plays, but if you're one-on-one in space and you miss, you're going to.
Yeah, it's the difference between in theory and in practice. In theory, on paper, this defense limits explosive plays. In practice, if you don't tackle, it doesn't matter what defense you're running. The guy you had accounting for that threat,
you're done.
Didn't beat the assignment.
So we know what we're going to see. It's going to be cover 3. It's going to be Tampa 2. We're rushing with 4. They took Leatu Latu specifically for that because we're a team that rushes with 4. Let's get a guy that we think can rush really well when we're rushing with 4.
Yep.
Bang, bang, boom. Gus has played this defense forever. And is it ever going to be a top 5 unit? Well, when you have the talent to do that, sure. like they had in Seattle in the early 2010s, it'll be a top 5 unit, it'll be a top 1 unit. And they're slowly but surely trying to build up that talent level to be that. But very rarely is this defense ever going to be bad.
Right.
Because they play the coverage that is specifically designed to not be bad. I think the only time we ever saw it really get shredded was when Andy Reid was like, oh, so we can just run deep crosses to Tyreek Hill? Cool. But other than that, other than the times you're going up against the most talented quarterback we've ever seen and one of the most dangerous receivers we've ever seen on the field together and, the best receiving tight end the game has ever seen on the field together. Other than that, this defense works pretty well.
It holds up pretty well. And that's an excellent transition to power structure in Indianapolis, which has been quite stable. Again, coaching change for sure in terms of the head coach, but Chris Ballard has been there. He has a very strong vision. And some GMs, it seems like they are more carried by, well, I'll use a nautical analogy, the tides or the breeze. Like it changes more rapidly. Chris Ballard has a type. He believes in it. He understands what certainly his defensive coordinator needs in terms of talent, and he is going to go find those pieces and has year over year. Head coach Shane Steichen going into year 2. We've talked quite a bit about him. So in terms of coordinators, the offensive coordinator, Jim Bob Cooter. Defensive coordinator we just talked about, Gus Bradley, well known. Special teams coordinator, Brian Mason. In terms of notable coaches on offense below that, position coaches, Reggie Wayne is the wide receivers coach. I'm not going to talk a lot about Reggie Wayne. There's Colts fans watching this. Needs no introduction. Very good coach. DeAndre Smith is a running back coach. 24 years of coaching experience, including the last 2 in the NFL. Before that, he was at Texas Tech. Coach Darwin Thompson at Utah State. For draft fans, we were big Darwin Thompson guys when he came out in the draft. And Alex Tanney is the pass game coordinator. Former Monmouth.
Wait,
yes.
That Alex Tanney?
That Alex Tanney.
I didn't even know he was coaching.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is why this section is so much fun. Former Monmouth Fighting Scots QB. Gotta love the mascot. Climbing the NFL coaching ranks. He was with Steichen in Philly and now follows him to Indy. Tanney's brother Mitch was previously the director of analytics for the Broncos. So a football family. We talk about coaching families all the time, and the Donatels and many other families, you know, the Callahans. There's many coaching family trees throughout the NFL. But a football family for sure, but in a little bit of a different bent. Analytics and coaching. I thought that was a fun mix. On defense and special teams, Richard Smith is a linebackers and defensive run game coordinator. 46 years of coaching experience.
Is that all?
Yeah, just that. Like, whenever you see like 3 decades, 4 decades, some of these guys have 5 decades of coaching experience. I'm going to call that out. He has forgotten more about football than we're going to know. Ron Milas, the DB coach, 34 years coaching, 24 in the NFL. He was born in Tacoma, which is fun, just right over there. Went on to be a UW Husky. His son Ryan is the defensive assistant with your Texans. And his other son, Bobby, speaking of a family business, is a high school coach in Arizona. So obviously runs in the family. And then Cato June, speaking of people that need no introduction to Colts fans, is the linebackers coach. Sorry, assistant linebackers coach behind Richard Smith.
I don't think we ever actually called this out, but our little setup here is right on the water here in the Puget Sound. You know, we always do a home and home for this series. So I'm up at the Pacific Northwest. EJ's going to come down to LA to finish off this series for the remaining 4 divisions. Tacoma is how many miles by the crow flies from us right now?
Like 7.5.
Yeah,
not far.
Great weather we're having, by the way, he said facetiously. Every time I show up here thinking like, oh, June in Seattle, it'll be great. Like, nope, here's a storm. Here's 60-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
They're going to sound like it's ripping the siding off the house.
Yeah, broken trees in the driveway. You know, typical.
It's like, it's June. Come on.
January. We have it every year.
Hopefully it's sunny by tomorrow. Honestly, hopefully it's just sunny by the Texans episode. So we can finally go outside. All right, given all that information, the scheme stuff, the coaching staff stuff, the allusions to the draft that we've had, and we'll cover the draft in more in depth in a little bit. But given everything we've talked about so far, which has been a lot, that brings us to one of our favorite segments, the Underdog Top 3, which is solely designed for our fellow degenerates out there that are in way too many fantasy leagues. I think in terms of non-best ball leagues, I'm up to like 16. If I throw in best ball on top of that, it's not a good number.
A number I don't want to tell my wife.
Basically, I have to wake up at 6 a.m. every Sunday just to like start setting my lineup so I can finish by 10. It's a lot. And that's why we have this segment, is because we're trying to identify the best values for every single team. We do this for all 32 teams because some teams, like Philly, talk about Philly a lot today, some teams are very expensive. If you're going to take Hurts, he's a top 2 quarterback. If you're going to take A.J. Brown, he's a top 5 receiver. If you're going to take Devontae Smith, I think he's also a top 12 receiver. Like, Goddard's not cheap. Saquon's not cheap. Like, there's just no values to be had in Philly. There's some values to be had in Indy.
Few.
But I think the hard part is agreeing on who those values actually are, and I'll explain what I mean by that. We'll start with Anthony Richardson, just to kind of get that out of the way, because he's already, like, the hype is already being priced in. He's already at QB6. I wouldn't classify him as a value, but the fact that I think there is a legitimate possibility he finishes better than QB6 means maybe it's a slight sort of kind of discount. I'm not going to pretend like it's a crazy value. I just wanted to throw Anthony Richardson in there because how could you not? He's going to have a great year. But as far as the actual value, I'm going to save the discussion on the receivers till the end because that's the fascinating one where it's like, which one do you actually get? But as far as actual, like, stone cold value, 100%, this is underpriced. You need to go after him. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200, all that kind of stuff. Jelani Woods, TE 30 on Underdog Fantasy right now if you're looking at ADPs. This is a man who is 6'6", 250, runs like a deer, great contested catcher, a little bit of wiggle after the catch too for somebody who's his size. I mean, he's a freaking moose. As far as my comp for him, it's literally a moose that can catch a football. He missed the entirety of 2023 with various ailments. I want to say it was hamstrings. But he's back. He's a legitimate seam ripper. They didn't really make an actual effort to replace him at all in the offseason, which to me signals like, oh no, they believe in him.
He's coming back. Yeah.
Right? Maybe if Brock Bowers was there at 15, they would have entertained the idea. But even then, Bowers is just a different tight end than Jelani, so I wouldn't even really consider that a replacement. That's just a compliment.
Another one.
Right? But, you know, they didn't bring in another wide tight end in the offseason to compete with him. It's like, this is Jelani Woods' show. And somebody this talented, this physically gifted, with that kind of catch radius, in this kind of offense, with this kind of quarterback, that are this good in the red zone, TE 30? Come on now.
I don't think you're finding 30 better potential prospects to power you in fantasy football than a healthy Jelani Woods in this offense with AR. Like, I think that's it. That's the summary.
The fact that he's going this low, I think, is just because, A, after his rookie year, like he didn't get a sophomore year to kind of establish himself. So he's dirt cheap just because I think people don't know him.
Right, they forgot about it. He had some breakout flashes as a rookie. They didn't see those, and then he's a year removed because he was out with injury, out of sight, out of mind. I think that's what TE30 reflects, not his actual talent.
And that brings us to the receivers because this is the real discussion that I talked about earlier, where it's like, we know there's values, we just can't agree on which one's the actual value. So
I wonder why.
I would love to get all of your comments of which one you're actually targeting, because I don't think anybody can agree on this. You could make an argument that all three of the presumably top three receivers on this offense are undervalued. We just don't know which one's the most undervalued. Michael Pittman's at wide receiver 23, which makes sense. He's the most productive one there. Adonai Mitchell is at wide receiver 57, which is very low for me. Josh Downs is at wide receiver 62, which is very low for you. I think the real debate is not, are they all values? Yes, they're all values. I think literally all three of them will probably finish higher than where they're listed right now. The biggest question for people that are value hunting is, which one's the biggest value? Which one am I getting the biggest return on investment? If it was me, it's AD Mitchell. If it was you, is it Josh Downs?
It probably is Josh Downs if we're talking about pure value, not just who's going to produce the most. I think Pittman is the safest.
He's definitely the safest, yeah.
He is going to get number one targets in this offense. That's known. That's not a change. He did it under this coaching staff. Like, everything is the same. He has been a very consistent performer. I believe he will continue to be a very consistent performer. I don't believe he's going to be de-emphasized or anything in this offense. So 23 seems a little low, so it's a small value. So if we're talking about the amount of value, it's not Pittman. Pittman is you get what you pay for, and you might get a little bit more, and that's great. That's still a value. But in terms of like, hey, buy low and get, sell high returns at the end of the season, for me, Josh Downs as wide receiver 62 is maybe a commensurate percentage undervalued, but because he's so far down, you're going to get a greater return. And I wouldn't be surprised. This is little tiny stake in the ground. I wouldn't be surprised if just straight up Josh Downs outperforms A.D. Mitchell.
And honestly, the key factor here, because we talked about the scheme stuff earlier,
Right.
and we talked about the scheme stuff first to set the table for this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
If we're looking at how this team is going to attack quarters, on the theory that teams are going to attack them similar to how they attack the Eagles with Hurts, of can't play cover 1 because AR is going to run, can't play cover 3 because they're going to RPO us to death. Guess we got to play quarters. It's the only thing that will help against both, right?
Right.
Best way to punish quarters is you run pin post. You have your number 2 receiver, and you can run this out of 2x2 or 3x1. They're probably going to be in 2x2. So you have your slot receiver, run like a deep curl, if you want to call it, where it's pinning that safety down. All right, and then we run a deep post behind it because there's no dedicated zone help in the middle of the field, because the corner and the safety on the other side are also having to deal with the other 2 threats on the other side if they're both going vertical. So you're basically baiting both of those other guys to vacate the middle of the field. You throw a deep post behind it. You're just throwing to grass, and you're leading your receiver to it, right? And so it turns it into a pure one-on-one with a leverage advantage down the field. That is how you punish quarters. That is how people have punished quarters since the beginning of time.
Right. That is the classic quarters beater.
Like, literally, that's what some coaches call it. Like Coach Vass, when he sees that concept, they don't call it pin post. They don't call it mills. He's like, yeah, quarters beater. That's what people use it for. So the question is, who's running that post? Is it AD? Is it Josh Downs? You can argue for either one of them.
Yep.
Like, truthfully. You could even argue, just considering the size and the speed of Alec Pierce, you could argue he's going to get some of those looks.
I hope he does.
He should.
He should. That's not the same thing.
But I don't know.
No.
I really don't know. And so for me, it comes down to, this is going to sound crazy, it's just what I thought of him as a prospect. Mm-hmm. Like, who's the most talented guy? Like, and I love Josh Downs. Josh Downs is extremely talented. You all know that we were super high on Josh
Yeah, it was
Downs.
one of my offensive gems the year he came out.
I had A.D. Mitchell as wide receiver 4 in this class. You didn't. I think that's literally the difference is I'm just really, really high on AD. And so I'm just going to, in the absence of evidence on the field since the last time we saw him play at Texas,
Yeah.
I'm just going to be like, well, I liked him a lot in college. He's a perfect fit for what they do. I'm going to roll the dice with that versus, Josh Downs, who we also liked a lot as a prospect, who has proven it a little bit on the field. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a what we've seen versus what we think we're going to see.
Yep.
I don't think there's a wrong answer.
No, it's a potential forecast, right? This is do I want a futures forecast? Do I want the possibly, what's in box number 3? Well, I think it could be greater than what I've already seen, which is good in box number, 1 with Josh Downs in terms of that role. He too was able to do that in college. He tracked down a lot of those balls in college. It's not like this is a new route for him. I think he's much more likely alignment-wise. If you're giving me this distribution of receivers and saying, okay, put them in a 2x2, which again, as we've established, the most popular offensive formation for them, I'm putting A.D. Mitchell outside.
Yeah, Downs is more your traditional slot body type, even though he obviously works outside too. But
sure.
Between all 3 of these guys, Pittman, AD, and Downs, like, who's most likely going to work inside? It's probably Josh Downs.
Right.
So.
And then if we're really trying to confuse offenses, the aforementioned Alec Pierce is 4, right? The other big slot, power slot, speed slot, whatever you want to call him. And then you're really challenging defenses to say, which side do you think it's going to come from this time? Because last time or last 2 times we ran it to Downs and we ran, Alex Pierce on that. Alec Pierce, by the way, small soapbox, ran more miles than anybody else in the NFL because the route they used him on, they didn't throw to him a lot, but the route they used him on more than anything was, Alec, go pull the safety. Alec, go pull the safety. Alec, go pull the safety. And he just
Sir, yes, sir.
sprinted. His distance covered. I looked it up on Next Gen Stats middle of the season because I was like, man, it just seems like he's running and running and running the whole game and he's not getting targets. And I looked up the distance run versus the actual number of times he was targeted, and he was first in the NFL by a long shot in terms of the ratio between those 2 numbers. So if you're trying to challenge a defense, you've got two guys who have great speed, different size profiles, but can both take the top off on a safety, and you're just challenging a defense to pick one and then making them pick wrong. Oh, we did downs. This time it's Pierce, right? We're just going to pull one short, pull that safety off, pin pull, whatever you want to call it, passing concept, and then we're going to have the other guy go deep. They can both convert deep throws. I just hope they throw it to Alec Pierce a little bit, because reward the guy. He's running like 6 miles every Sunday.
And to throw kind of a wrench into it even more, like, what's the other way to beat quarters? Outbreakers against the safety, because the safety is going to be inside leverage. So, you run a 9 with the outside receiver, and then you throw a deep out to the slot, and it's like, okay, well, maybe Josh Downs is going to get that. Like, I don't know, man. It's, as far as I'm concerned, you can't go wrong taking any Colts skill position player.
You're just trying to be the most right.
Yes, that's literally it. I was trying to find the way to phrase it. Like, you're not going to be wrong. You're just trying to be right-er.
Yes.
And I really don't know at this point. I have no clue. And I think that's why ultimately you just take Anthony Richardson, because no matter what, you're going to get points.
And it is going to come down to the chemistry he develops. He's got to develop chemistry with A.D. Mitchell. He already had a little bit with Downs, Pittman from practice and OTAs and everything else, even though he only had a little bit of time in season. So we'll see how that relationship goes, because that's the key, is when players are stressed, when quarterbacks are stressed, they go to the guy that they are most comfortable with. And that comfort is built through chemistry and I'm going to say demonstrated ability in practice. Like, hey, man, I whipped that up. That guy had him covered, and he still came down with it. Like, the same thing happens in games in that split second of, like, I got a choice between this guy and this guy. Guy's a little more covered, but 80% of the time I throw it at him, he comes down with it. And we don't know who AR's guy's going to be yet.
Yeah.
Right? And I think we're going to see that. Look, the best quarterbacks have a very even distribution so that defenses can't key on that. But if they have a very strong relationship with the receiver, that guy's going to get more of those targets, theoretically more of those yards, and eventually more of those touchdowns.
Moving on to our free agency section, how this team attacked March. It's interesting how not a lot happened, but also a lot happened at the exact same time. They kind of more focused on housekeeping, keeping their guys paid, paying them early in the process, by the way, as in we're making sure we're getting our contract signed on March 11th, I think was when Pittman got his done, versus June, right? Because we've seen the escalation in a lot of these markets since 3 months ago. And it's so funny at the time, like the Pittman contract was like, $23 million. I don't know about that. Now you're seeing Jefferson get 35 and you're like, okay, it's a pretty good deal. Like, I think their focus on let's retain our guys and let's sign them now before these deals get ridiculous. That was probably a prudent one. And they pretty much just spent all their money in-house.
Yeah, this is a Chris Ballard staple. We talked about this earlier in the series about getting sort of the book on a GM, and retaining in-house talent is a priority for the Colts and for Ballard. And also getting ahead of the market. He's shown that as a more recent turn in his curve. This is not an accident. This is standard operating procedure for Ballard and the Colts in both cases. We're going to keep our guys. We're going to show the locker room that if you succeed here, you're going to get paid. But we are going to do that early because we want to pay as little as we possibly can. That's still fair market, and we're not going to wait for the market to be unfair in terms of when to do that. In terms of players they just flat out lost or moved on, really only two. We're going to put the entire list on the screen, but the ones that we're going to highlight are Zach Moss moving on to the Bengals. Great opportunity for him. He becomes their lead back with Joe Mixon moving on. And then Gardner Minshew is a sort of, it's almost a strategic turn. It's weird to talk about moving on from a backup quarterback being any kind of your overall strategy, but they're feeling comfortable enough to do that. They know, and of course they want AR on the field, and that's their priority. They drafted him high, and they think he gives them, well, I don't even think they think. He gives them the best potential to win football games. That's what they're focusing on. And look, the Colts have a long history of focusing on their top quarterback. Tom Moore famously said, we don't practice when Peyton goes down, because if Peyton goes down, we're fucked.
We don't practice fucked.
Yeah, and we don't practice fucked. So it's a kind of mini version of burning the boats. Gardner, earned a very nice payday to move on. He's probably going to start a bunch of games with the Raiders because everywhere he goes, Gardner Minshew ends up starting a bunch of games. It's a thing. It's a feature, not a bug by now. But really, those are the two names. There's a bunch of other names, but in terms of percentage of downs played, in terms of how much the team really relied on them or they were a linchpin of the scheme, there's not a lot here.
Yeah, no, they didn't lose anybody that was critical or mission critical, I should say. There were some teams where they lost some heavy hitters and were like, sorry, you're not going to replace that. You ran up against the cap and you couldn't afford everybody, and so you lost some of your best players as a result. We talk about Christian Wilkins, like Miami's not replacing Christian Wilkins. The Colts didn't have any of those losses where you look at it and you're like, okay,
oh damn, now what are you going to
do? They kept all their guys, which brings us to who they retained, like DeForest Buckner. He got extended at $23 million, which if you're looking at the interior defensive line market right now.
Speaking of Mr. Wilkins.
Bargain, like absolute bargain. Kenny Moore they brought back at $10 million a year. I was a little bit more surprised by that one, more so the number that Kenny Moore got. But again, I mean, top safeties are making more than double that. Top corners are making 2.5 times that, something like that.
And he's super important to their system. We're talking a guy that played 90+% of their snaps. They count on him, and in classic Colts fashion, they paid him.
Zaire Franklin got brought back. Really good player, really underrated linebacker. The Colts, honestly, they've had a pretty deep linebacker room for a while now, and he's just another one. Julian Blackmon, they also brought back at 3.7, which is 1/7 of the top of the safety market, 1/6. So pretty good deal for them. And then Michael Pittman Jr., like we mentioned, to get $23.3 million. They did that in the second week of March, and when he signed that deal, I think he was the 7th highest receiver in terms of average per year in the NFL. And by June, we are recording this, June 4th?
Yep.
He is 12th. So
life comes at you fast.
That contract's already aged pretty well.
Beautifully.
We still haven't even seen Jamar Chase get paid, T. Higgins get paid, but like Nico Collins is already making more than him. Jalen Waddle's making more. Both of the Eagles' top 2 receivers got paid since then. Jefferson got paid. CD hasn't got paid yet. Like, he's going to end up by probably either September.
It's going to be his ADP.
Yeah,
his
probably.
Contract value is going to match his ADP, which is like bananas.
He's going to be at like 17th by kickoff. Wow. At the rate it's going. Like Amon-Ra got paid. Like I don't know. It's a great deal just because of the timing of it, and maybe he's looking back and he's thinking like, shit. Like
I don't know. I think he's looking forward and saying, I get to work with Shane Steichen, who completely understands who I am and what I can do. I get to work with a healthy AR. It's going to look pretty good when I'm the leading receiver on a fully functional, battle station of AR offense. I think I'll be all right.
I will say this. The contract is structured in a way where I think he has an understanding, and I'm sure the Colts have an understanding of like, hey, if you play 2 years on this thing and you're blowing it out of the water, which he very easily could do, they'll take care of him.
We'll take care of him.
They'll take care of him.
Yeah.
Because he's already at a discount for them.
Right.
So.
And that's the grace that practice of paying your guys when they succeed, and yes, paying them early to a lesser extent, but making sure guys know, if you do what we want you to do at the level we expect you to do it, we're going to take care of you. That's the money where your mouth is part of that arrangement, and allows players to, again, opt in to saying, okay, I'll sign early because I know if I do the right thing, you're going to do the right thing.
In terms of third-party additions, it is 2 names. It's Raekwon Davis and Joe Flacco. Neither of them are very expensive. Again, they spent most of their money in-house, as they should. Raekwon is at $7 million a year to improve their interior rotation, which was already pretty strong.
Yep.
And Joe Flacco to be, that veteran. I mean, super veteran at this point. He's 39. To be kind of that guide for Ants as he's trying to make his way in the league. And we know he can still play.
I was going to say, and give them the ability to win a few games when a physical quarterback like AR, who's shown that he's, had some injuries, he's going to be dinged. It's a long season. All all positions are going to take more injuries as we go from a 17 to an 18 game season. When that happens, you got to have a guy that can step in and win a couple of games. And Flacco has proved that he is sharp for those first 3 or 4 games. That's what Steichen and the Colts are really counting on is, look, we're going to have a couple of games where AR's a little beat up. We want him to get some rest. It's a short turnaround week, whatever. If we need to play Joe Flacco a little bit, we're good with that.
Well, in typical bootleg fashion, the second I complain about it being stormy and rainy, the sun pops out. So we're finally getting good weather.
It's your Southern California superpower. You just say sun, and the sun goes, okay, wait, I'll be there.
It is positively gorgeous today. Well, now it is.
Now it is.
Last night, by the way, a little behind-the-scenes thing. Last night, something real bad was going on outside because, I mean, trees were downed. Like, we heard really hellacious sounds coming off the water. Like, whatever storm hit last night was not fucking around. But it seems to have finally broke. So we're going to have maybe a little barbecue out on the deck today. How about that?
Seems possible as long as there's not 40-mile-an-hour winds sustained.
With 60-mile-an-hour gusts. Like, I'm not kidding. That's what it was. Moving on to the draft and how this team approached April after a pretty successful March. Once again, strong class for Chris Ballard. He has a tendency to put those together. Really, their only problem as a franchise was nailing quarterback. Like they
just put it off.
They put it off significantly, and then they took a big swing, and that big swing was like real bad. But eventually, once they fixed that issue, I didn't have any doubts about Ballard's ability to build the rest of the roster because I thought that he built a pretty strong roster. It was just quarterback. So I'm not super surprised by the fact that they had a good draft. I kind of expected them to have a good draft. I didn't expect them to get Leatu Latu and A.D. Mitchell like back-to-back off the jump. That kind of pissed me off a lot. But other than that, like, oh yeah, let's take some freak athletes like Tanner Bortolini. Let's take some dart throws on day 3 that have super high upside. Like, it felt like a very Colts draft, top to bottom. And that's a compliment to me. Like, it's a good class.
Ballard is a sort of master of, again, using every possible option. We've talked about how he uses free agency and re-signing guys or letting them go. He has a very, I think, full draft record at this point. You have a book on Ballard and how he approaches the draft, and also UDFAs, which we'll talk about in a minute. The Colts have always been very active in that process. All 3 phases, he's going to use all of them to try and improve the team. He's not one of those rest on his laurels type of GMs. And now that they have quarterback taken care of, which was their Achilles heel for a while, they're free to build the rest of the roster around him. Leatu Latu, I think the most talented edge rusher in this draft. They get him at 15. The Colts also are one of the coolest teams. Shout out to them in terms of being transparent about their draft process and showing that process and releasing that, film and footage to the public to really get the ins and outs of how they were thinking about it. And Chris Ballard was laughing when Leatu Latu was there at 15. He's like, we didn't even have to do anything. We got the guy we wanted to. Like, we thought this wasn't going to be a possibility. We're right where we want to be. That's an excellent place to be as an NFL team. Latu, again, is going to give them juice in the pass rush, which they need because they typically rush 4. You need guys that can win one-on-ones. Latu absolutely can. A.D. Mitchell, second round, 52nd pick overall. We talked about him. He gives them another threat outside with size, with speed. We'll see if he realizes that potential because he can do it all physically. Like, there's no doubt about that. There's never been any doubt about that. It's how he gets used and how he develops those opportunities and what his relationship is with Shane Steichen and with AR. All that's to be determined, but in terms of physical talent, he's not short anywhere. He's got all the gifts you need. Matt Goncalves, the tackle out of Pitt, 3rd round, 79th overall. They needed offensive line help. This is where they did it. We'll see. He was a very popular name pre-draft. Like, his 30 visits, he went to a lot more teams than a lot of people thought he might.
A lot of that is because, he didn't really get a workout because he was coming off injury, but, like, the tape was good.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we're just going off GPS information, like, people thought he was going to test really well, which checks out. The Colts don't take anybody who's not super athletic. But he was a popular guy for 30 visits just because I think a lot of teams were like, we think we know what you are. We don't have any testing numbers to confirm it, but let's bring you in the building. Let's ask you questions. Let's get to know you. Like I'm sure his medicals were very closely scrutinized by every single team, but ultimately, even with that injury, he was still good enough to go in the back of the third. Like I think he very easily could have gone in the second round if he was healthy.
Yeah, it's that mid-wave that we talked about. If you watched our draft coverage of sort of the middle of the second wave of tackles or the top of the third wave of tackles, wherever you had him ranked, is a very popular name. And then tackles went off early as we expected them to, and they were lucky to get him as late as they did with the 79th overall pick because they certainly needed some help at tackle. Then Tanner Bortolini, we'll just say interior offensive line, I'll say center out of Wisconsin, who has our colleague Josh's favorite number in terms of an interior offensive lineman. Like it's a magic number in terms of if you test at this level, 85% of you play, what is it? How many years?
I know it's short shuttle. Like if I can't remember the exact number threshold, but he hit it.
Something. Yep.
It's 4 something in the shuttle. And he hit that number. And I think it's 85% of everybody who was under that number are starters. And I think it's like 70% or something like that of those starters get second contracts.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good indicator of like, hey, if you're a good enough mover at offensive line to put this kind of number up as a short shuttle, typically that movement skill is going to translate to being a very good NFL offensive lineman. And, we've seen guys like Jason Kelsey hit that number. We've seen guys like, I think it was Quentin Nelson, another Colt, hit that number.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying there is a magic number for offensive line scouting, but that is one that has a pretty high correlation of success, and he hit that.
Pretty solid cheat code. They grab him in the 4th round at 117 overall. Then Anthony Gold, wide receiver out of Oregon State. This is the first of 3 fifth-round picks for them. They got him at 142. Undersized, speedster, returnability, flashes big playmaking. He's, in my mind, a budget version of Josh Downs and can and probably will find a role in this offense. Again, they've used receivers with his characteristics very, very well, but I like Dan Gold. I saw him at the Oregon State Pro Day. His tape had some very flashy flashes. We want to talk about high highs against Pac-12 competition. I liked that addition, and again, in the 5th round, it felt it wasn't like a crazy value. We talked about values, but it was right-sized, and it's like, I didn't think he was going to last a lot longer than that.
It's almost unfortunate that he's in Indy because I just don't think he's going to get that many snaps because of the receiving core they have. But like as far as just fit goes, like even if he gets 15 snaps a game, like I think those 15 snaps are going to be fun because he's got speed, like real speed, like face-melting speed. And I think Shane Steichen's proven he knows how to use that.
Jalen Carlisle's a safety out of Missouri as his second 5th-round pick at 151. Jalen Simpson, the safety out of Auburn, at 164. Again, the last of their 5th-round picks. I was surprised he lasted that long. Very experienced SEC safety. Ballard and co., I think, at that point probably looked at the board and went, Jalen Simpson's still there? Sure, we'll take that.
On the day of recording this, unfortunately, we got the news that Daniel Scott tore his Achilles in OTAs. So, again, very, very unfortunately, because he was a really talented player coming out. First 2 years of his career, he's now missing the 2 consecutive season-ending injuries. So there is a roster spot available at safety. I have to imagine Carlisle and Simpson are both going to be competing for that. And then Mike Abraham and Lealu, the interior defensive lineman at Oklahoma. I'm not sure I can find a spot for them. Like maybe they're probably both practice squad guys, which is probably a testament as well to the depth of this roster. That like I had day 3 grades on both of them. I didn't have PFA grades. I had draftable grades on them, but I'm just looking at this team and I'm like, where are they going to play?
Yeah, whose spot are they going to take? And you never can say that they're not going to, but if we're talking about probabilities, I'm with you. It's small.
In terms of UDFAs, pretty much the only ones that I think might have a shot of making the team, and it's only one of them. It's Keaton Slovis and Jason Bean, the quarterbacks from BYU and Kansas, respectively. And even then, they might both be camp arms. Mm-hmm. Like, it's still very possible that neither of them make this squad. Because, again, you got Ant at QB1. You got Flacco as the veteran backup. You got Sam Ehlinger at QB3. Like, honestly, I'm not sure either one of them will beat out Ehlinger. So, it's very possible they have no UDFAs, or at least none that I can project right now, that crack the current available roster spots.
Yep.
which is a testament once again to the quality of the roster. Because normally, like when we're doing all these teams, we're like, I think he's going to make it. I think he's going to make it. I think he's going to make it. Like I look at this UDFA group through no fault of their own. Like I don't have anything against the players. It's more so just what's the opening?
Yeah. Where?
Where? I don't know.
So we talk about situation and opportunity. A lot of their situations are pretty good, but their opportunities are pretty limited, and they're going to have to play extremely well to displace one of the players that the Colts, again, have brought in, retained, are familiar with in their system. I'm thinking about Ellinger in particular. Brings them a very strong running element, which Slovis doesn't. Bean does, but is Bean going to be more familiar in the system? You know, Ellinger's got a year ahead. He's got a physical profile they like, brings them something a little bit different, which is very handy for a third quarterback for scout teamwork. Like, it's going to be tough to displace him. And the same with guys like Xavier White and Trent Penix. They have talented wide receiver and tight end groups. Like, whose spot are you going to take? And it is a credit to Ballard and his staff and a testament to like how they've put this roster together that it's tough to make the Colts, right?
All right, I think we've spent enough time hyping them up. This episode's been a little bit disgusting to do, and I'm ready for it to be over. All right, let's get to the summary section where we do our thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs even, which is our way of basically just giving a single vibe-based evaluation on did they get better, did they get worse, or through all of their collective additions and subtractions, are they just even? And then we get into our ceiling and floor of record. But for thumbs up, thumbs down, I'm actually going to go neither. I am going to go thumbs even. And I know people will say, like, how could you possibly praise this team this much and go thumbs even? My point is they were already good.
Yeah, go watch last year.
They hit the bottom last year at 9 wins. We thought they could have won 11.
Yeah.
Like, they're already good. There's not that much more room to go up. And, like, my feelings haven't changed.
Right.
They're still deep. They're still explosive. They got a good offensive line when their guys are healthy, and Blake Freeland isn't on the field. They got a good pass rush. Like, they got a good scheme. They got a good coaching staff. We think they have a really freaky alien quarterback if he stays on the field. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I thought they were already good. They're still good. That's a compliment to me. Like, I'm not going to say thumbs up because thumbs up is, like, implying they're going to be a 13-win team, and maybe they will, but, like, am I crazy for this?
You're not at all crazy. I also am going to go thumbs even, and again, it's not – a lot of people are going to take that as a backhanded compliment. I feel stronger about saying the win total that we're going to say for this year, which was the same win total that we said for last year. But I feel better about saying it this year. Last year it was more of a projection, right? It was more of a reach. It was more of, hey, if AR is what we think he is, and if Shane Steichen can maximize that, so it was more of a reach to say they're going to win 11 games last year. This year, we're like, no, we've seen the flashes from AR. If he stays healthy, they're going to be a better team than they were last year. Steichen did a tremendous job, regardless of the injuries. I feel more confident, even though it's the same win total. It feels like less of a reach to me. So I think thumbs even is we liked them last year. We're going to see a more fully featured team this year that I feel more confident about hitting that very same mark of wins, which, again, the division around them got tougher. So in terms of relative competition, saying that they're going to win the same amount of games is a greater compliment because it's going to be harder to do.
My ceiling has not changed since last year. It's still 11.
Yep.
Which, you know, again, could they win more than that? Like, yeah, theoretically, but I'm trying to be realistic.
Sure.
Right? Because it is a young quarterback. We've only seen him play in a few games. Like, I'm trying to temper expectations, but like 11 wins is really hard to do in the AFC. You have to be a phenomenal team to win 11 games in the AFC. But my floor, like that's the key difference from last year. My floor last year was 6.
Yeah.
My floor this year is 9 because they hit their floor last year and it was 9. So I'm just gonna be like, okay, well they're probably not gonna be worse than that. So it's a pretty narrow cone between 9 to 11 wins, which I know sounds like I'm downplaying them, but if you look at their schedule, like they start against the Texans, then they got the Packers, then they got the Bears, who are super talented in their own right, then they got the Steelers, who, you know, say what you want about the Steelers, they're a tough team to play against. They got the Jags, the Titans. Like, Titans are probably their easiest game up to that point. Then they got the Dolphins. They got at the Texans after that. Then they got the Vikings, the Bills, the Jets, the Lions, the Patriots, who are a tough defense, so they're probably going to win that game. Then they got the Broncos. They finish up with the Titans and the Giants and the Jags. Like, their first half of the schedule is significantly harder than the back half of their schedule, but that first half is kind of brutal. So if they win 11 games playing against that schedule, that's good. Like, that's really good. You're playing against the AFC South, which is great. You're playing against the NFC North, which is great. You're playing against the AFC East, which is 4 really tough defenses. If you get 11, that's probably a 3rd seed. You're hosting a playoff game. And then, we'll see how you handle Kansas City and Baltimore in January. But, like, that's kind of all they have to do. And I think they can do it.
It's an impressive team. I think, again, their ability to reach last year's ceiling and this year's ceiling, because I'm matching you at 11 for the ceiling, 9 for the floor. Because, again, same reasons you said. They hit 9 last year, and we already saw a catastrophic injury. We always say, oh, well, if the quarterback gets hurt, that's the floor. Well, the quarterback got hurt, and they still won 9 games. So I'm 11-9, but I think their ability to back that up is even greater, certainly with AR healthy, but also with a lot of the additions we talked about in the draft that we like. But it is a very, very competitive schedule. And if they win 11 games, they are a very solid, well-coached, talented team. And then we'll see. They have a puncher's chance in the playoffs.
Well, speaking of the playoffs, week 1 against the Texans, to me, is a playoff game. The second game against the Texans, to me, is a playoff game. Because that's probably going to determine who wins the division. It's probably going to determine who's hosting a playoff game. Might even determine who's hosting the other one in the wild card round.
Yeah.
Like, they're playing at minimum 2 playoff games in their own division, let alone against the Jags as well, who are another tough team. Not as tough as Houston, but still tough. Still going to be in contention for wild card themselves, in my opinion. So they don't get any weeks off. It's going to start in week 1 and just keep on getting tougher and tougher from there. So we'll see how they handle it. It's a very good team. Pains me to say, but one of the better teams in the AFC on paper. If Anthony Richardson stays healthy, if Shane Steichen keeps doing Shane Steichen things, like, sky's the limit. Really is. If we have sufficiently hyped you up while watching this, the least you can do, Colts fans, like, I know I'm a Texans fan, but the least you can do to pay me back for sitting through an hour plus of excruciatingly detailed praise of your team, which I did not enjoy doing. You can go to homage.com. You can look for Colts gear at the link in the description below, and you can support your team through that link, because anything you buy from Homage, our clothing partner, and EJ's actually wearing an Homage shirt right now for Lucas Oil, we get a cut of it. So if you would like to directly fund our campaign to make me talk positively about your team, you can do so at the link below. I'm still going to resent you for making me do it, but I willingly will do it as long as you pay me.
Great clothes. Super comfortable. Probably 80% of my wardrobe at this point, because yes, I get to work in a t-shirt every day, is Homage stuff. And honestly, if there's a clean Homage t-shirt in my drawer, like, it's going on. Like, it floats to the top of the pile. If it's at the bottom of the pile, I find it, I put it on. I wear them more than I care to admit, and I am not sad about that at all. They are super comfortable, long-lasting. I think they look great. Help support us. And, if you just can't decide on which team, if you have a couple of favorite teams, I know some people do that, get the bootleg one.
With all that said, I don't think I have anything else. We're going to get out of here before I say something really bad about the Colts. I've been holding it in for like a solid hour and a half at this point. So we're going to go eat some food. We're going to get ready for the Jags episode. We will see you guys tomorrow for that Jags episode. Shout out to all of our patrons. Shout out to all of our executive producers that help make this show possible. Wow. Whew, this bourbon is...
getting on top of you.
That's what happens when it's... Hold on. What proof is this? All right, it's 57%. It could have snuck up on me a little bit.
Ding.
But it's really good stuff. New Riff, check it out. I think they're based in Austin, right?
No, I first had it in Austin, but this is from Newport, Kentucky.
Oh, it is Kentucky, huh?
Indeed.
Okay, well, it's delicious, potent, but delicious.
Eat before consuming.
Thank you for making delicious things, New Riff. Thank you guys for watching this episode. We will see you tomorrow to talk Jags, which hopefully will be sufficiently less vitriolic than today. Sorry, the Colts just... I think it's still just resentment from Peyton Manning ruined my childhood. Okay, I'm going to get out of here.
Yeah, before he pops a gasket, we're going to go. We'll see you tomorrow.